interjection, just to clarify po, no? But I'd like to direct our questions to our guest, si Ms. Rose Nono Lin. Good evening po. So, Mr. Chair, if all is well, I'll proceed with my questioning. Ms. Lin, good evening. Mr. Chair, just to clarify po, no, because I know you've been answering this previously already quite a lot, although I just like to clarify. To give context, your name was mentioned in the previously presented matrix, and it raises a lot of questions. Of course, that's a reason why we have this hearing, to really clarify po kung, especially to hear your side on these matters. My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that Ms. Lynn Orelgo was already asked about yung Pharmally biological. No relation to Pharmally pharmaceutical.
Yes.
However, is it correct to state that when you mentioned earlier that Pharmally biological, what was the nature, just to clarify again, ano po yung nature ng Pharmally Biological Corporation?
Ang nature po sana nun na magiging business nun ay magtatayo po ng laboratory sa paggawa ng gamot.
And this is no longer functioning?
No po.
You mentioned earlier that, I think one of the congressmen mentioned that there were links between Pharmally Biological to Pharmally Philippines Holdings. You mentioned na wala pong link. Were you able to verify kung may link po?
Link po. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Pakiulit po ng tanong.
Sorry. Were you able to verify? Because earlier you answered in the negative when you were asked po if there was any link between Pharmally Biological, in which you are a incorporator po, no? And Pharmally Philippines Holdings.
Mr. Chair, wala pong Pharmally
Philippines Holdings.
Holdings po. Wala po.
Mr. Chair, may we ask the Secretary to flash the first slide that we asked to be prepared?
Secretariat?
Based on the corporate records, and you admitted this earlier, that you are a treasurer po, no, for Pharmally Biological. I'm not sure if it's clear in your screen po, but if you would see the sixth listed under the GIS, General Information Sheet for Pharmally Biological, meron pong nakasulat na Pharmally Philippine Holdings.
Mr. Chair, wala po talagang Pharmally Holdings.
But this is an official record that you've submitted before the SEC.
No, wala po.
How do we verify? Mr. Chair, I suppose may we perhaps invite a representative from the SEC so that we can confirm this finally. But just to share with the research person, nandito po siya. And actually, can we move to the next slide, please? As we mentioned earlier, based on the articles of incorporation, you were designated as treasurer for Pharmally Biological.
That's true po,
And
Mr.
with that,
Chair.
you've executed this treasurer's affidavit.
That's true po.
And in the treasurer's affidavit, basically, this is proof that you have accounted for at least the old ruling that you need to have 25% of the stock to be subscribed to, and then 25% of that to be paid. That would necessarily mean po that you are aware of your stockholders.
I will check po sa records po namin, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but just to
Thank you.
clarify, this is an official record. And may we have the next slide, please? And yun po, lumalabas dun, based on Article 8, that there was in fact a Pharmally Philippine Holdings. In fact, it is your majority shareholder with 10.3 million amount subscribed. And if we look at the other shareholders, and this is the initial po sa Articles of Incorporation po natin, lahat po nominal shares lang po. Are you sure you don't recall this corporation? This was there from the very beginning.
No, Mr. Chair. I'll double check po sa company
Okay.
papers po namin.
So, Mr. Chair, if that's the case, in your recollection, and to note po, no, it's interesting because it's Pharmally Philippines Holdings, but it is a Singaporean corporation based on the records.
Mr. Chair, sa pagkaalala ko po, wala pong Philippine, Pharmally Philippine po.
Opo. So, maybe know from your recollection, how did you come into incorporating Pharmally Biological
Ang
Corporation?
alam ko lang po sa Pharmally Biological, lahat po ng incorporator po yan, walang company, lahat po tao.
Lahat po tao?
Yes po.
Okay. And the majority of the resources that was put up for the stock holdings would be from who was the largest
Individual po.
stockholder? Individual. I mean,
Yeah,
sino
yung
po?
Singaporean po, na si Mr. Wang.
So there was a Singaporean involved?
Yes po, yung Singaporean. Actually po, yan po ang naging lacking director po doon sa Pharmally Pharmaceutical.
So you have an interlocking director?
Yes po.
itong Singaporean national.
Yes
But as
po.
of the incorporation of Pharmally Biological, siya rin po, he was already there.
Yes po.
Siguro po, Mr. Chair, we really will need the SEC to confirm this po based on the documents that were provided. But anyway, thank you for that clarification. We'll move on to the next. As mentioned and has been established, you seem to be a very prolific entrepreneur po, no? You have a series of corporations that you have incorporated, and you mentioned that not all of them were active. But
Yes.
I'm sure that you're well aware that quite a few of the corporations were mentioned in that matrix that was presented prior, and that's what actually sparked this. We just want to go through them po to have an understanding. I know some of them were mentioned earlier, but just to go through them one by one para we have a clarification. Yung sa XRL Holdings po, this you mentioned was a family corporation, tama po ba?
That's right po, Mr.
And
Chair.
its primary purpose is to hold holdings in what industry? Or is this supposed to hold all of your investments?
Yeah, that's true po.
Yung XRL po, this is 60% owned by you.
Yes.
And the 40% is owned by the husband.
Yes po.
And XRL has holdings in what subsidiaries po currently?
Sa ngayon po, wala pa. Kasi inaayos pa po namin yan.
So XRL came after the other corporation. So you're going to be retrofitting na lang
Yes
po yung
po.
others.
Oo.
Okay, understood.
Aayusin na lang po para maayos yung setup.
We also mentioned that there was a Xiongwei Technologies. Ito po ba is in the field of Philippine offshore gaming? Is that
Yes
correct?
po, before.
Opo. Prior. It is not closed down. You have not liquidated yet, but you are no longer operating as there is no more, or there is no license. Is that correct?
No po, close na po siya since 2023 pa.
As in, wrapped up na rin po yung
Yes.
corporate papers and you've already
Ay, sa
liquidated.
corporate papers po, Mr. Chair, inaayos na po yun.
Okay,
Pero
so hindi pa.
pagkakalam ko, wala na siyang operations, wala na lahat.
Okay po. Just to clarify po, kasi there's a difference between operation ceasing and the ceasing of the corporate life po, no? So, tuloy pa rin po yung corporate life, wala lang operations.
Yes po,
Okay.
that's right po.
Thank you. And that correct po, 30% po kayo.
Yes po.
And you were in the back end.
Yes, until
And-
2021.
Sino po yung front end operator? Was it your husband?
Ang operator, yes po.
So husband niyo po is involved with Pogo?
Operations.
Opo. So he knows the ins and outs of Philippine offshore gaming operations?
Yes po.
Yes, he does. Do you know anything about the operations of Philippine offshore gaming operations? Or mostly doon ka lang po talaga sa permitting?
Doon lang po talaga ako sa mga documents and permits po.
Okay, sige. We'll go back to that later. Ms. Lin, nabanggit rin po yung Paili Estate and Paili Holdings, and you've confirmed that you have a part in this po, no? In fact, for Paili Estate, you have 25% stake. May we know po what is the nature of the Paili Estate company?
Mr. Chair, yung Pili,
Paili.
ang Pili Holdings po, ito po ay holdings lamang.
Sorry, just to clarify po, Paili Estate.
Pili Estate,
Yes po.
sorry. Ang Pili Estate po, ito po yung may mga formerly known po as naka-on po. Sorry. Mr. Chair, yung Pili Estate po, formerly known po siya as Pili Holdings.
Oh, so they're one and the same?
No
Nag-
po.
they're-
Formerly known po siya as
Formerly known.
Pili Holdings. Yes po. Ito po ay holding companies po siya.
Sorry, can you clarify? You mentioned that they formerly known as Paili Holdings.
Yes po.
But when I said they're one and the same, you said they're not.
No po.
So,
Kasi mayroon po talaga siyang Pili Estate.
formerly known as... So that means may dalawa pa po or isa lang po?
Actually po, ang Pili Estate Group of Corporation, formerly known po siya as Pili Holdings.
Okay, and the second corporation would be?
Pili Holdings Corporation.
Okay, so the group of company would be known as holdings and the isa estate naman.
Yes po,
Okay.
yes
So
po.
in any which case, both are now holdings. Is that what
Both
you're saying
are
now?
holding companies.
Both are holding companies. And
Yes.
ito po yung nabanggit earlier na mentioned sa Clark mega project
Yes
po
po.
ba? Okay. Thank you. And but you have a personal stake here po, no? 25%. Tama po ba? Okay. Thank you. Another corporation we'd like to go for, yung Full Win Gaming Corporation. Is this familiar to you po, Ms. Lin?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Full Win?
Full Win.
Opo. And it's correct that you have 30% stake in this?
Let me check po, Mr. Chair, ha. Yes, Mr. Chair.
And may we know the nature of the Full Wind Gaming Corporation?
Mr. Chair, itong Full Wind is non-operating companies po to since 2021 pa.
And ano po yung operations niya prior to the
No,
season?
wala po siyang operation talaga.
No operation at all?
No operation at all.
What was the intended industry po na papasukan po nila?
Dapat po ito yung Full Wind, gagawin po ito dapat na holdings din po, holdings company. Ito dapat yung una.
Okay, the first holdings company.
Yes po.
Understood. Okay. And of course, we have pharmaceutical, biological, which you've already explained. As treasurer, gagawa po sana ng factory for
Yes
medical
po.
supplies. And then, of course, we have yung Golden 999. This is a real estate company, tama po ba?
Golden Sun 99
Golden Sun.
po, it's ano po, warehouse.
Warehousing.
Na.
Okay po. And you have a personal stake of 15%.
Yes po.
Apo. So amongst these corporations, would you say the bulk of your income comes from the mentioned corporations, or kasi you and your husband seem to be very fond of holding corporations po, no? So usually that means corporasyon po ito na may pagmamay-ari ng iba't iba pang mga korporasyon. Pero at the end of the day, all of the financials would stem going upwards po, no? They funnel into these holdings corporations. Tama po ba?
We fund, sorry,
No,
Mr. Chair.
yung any profit, any revenue that the subsidiaries make, in order for it to reach the intended or the end user, yung stockholder, dumadaan po ito sa holdings corporation. Yun yung
Supposed to be.
purpose.
Yes,
Supposed to be.
yun po yung plano.
That's
Na
the
dapat
plan.
sa holdings po
Yes.
dadaan. Kaya may holdings company.
So from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mentioned corporations, would you say the bulk of your net worth, the bulk of your income comes from this? Or may corporations pa not mentioned in which you would credit most of your net worth po?
Actually, Mr. Chair, may mga corporations pa po kami.
And given these corporations, how much percent would you say from your net worth itong anim? Ballpark figure lang po siguro.
Hindi ko masasabi, more or less, Mr. Chair.
You won't be able to tell if it's at least half of your net worth? 3/4?
Hindi ko masasabi, Mr. Chair.
And how many more corporations outside of these holdings companies would you say that you still have? Yung operating na lang po, para we have an idea of the revenue structure that you have.
Siguro may dalawa o tatlo pa, Mr. Chair.
2 or 3 specific corporations or holdings rin po sila?
Hindi po.
Specific naman?
Yes po.
And we don't have to clarify po, no, but just for an idea, ano po yung industry nitong 2 or 3?
Yung tatlo?
Yes, the
Real
industry.
estate po.
So mostly real estate rin
Yes
po talaga? Okay. But you have an idea out of the 2 or 3 versus the 6 that were mentioned, wala po tayong idea, although you mentioned that you're on more on the back end, who does your finances then po, ma'am?
Mayroon po kami tax lawyer.
The tax lawyer. So
Yes
as long
po.
as your only concern is pumapasok lang naman yung pera, you don't
Yes
really need
po.
to know which side
Yes
it's from.
po.
Which is understandable po, no? Kasi as a businesswoman, sa rami-daming korporasyon, it's understandable there are multiple streams of income, you might not necessarily be involved po with the specific. So that's perfectly understandable. But I ask this, Mr. Chair, because out of those mentioned, and I think this is just a repetition of what was mentioned earlier, yung Sean Wei, it was a POGO operator. You also have the Paile Estate, which was linked to DCLA, Yangtze, and yung sa Cagayan de Oro, which was mentioned by Colonel Asierto. And of course, yung Golden Sun, which has been linked allegedly to the Shabu raid in Mexico, Pampanga. These are just some of the red flags that actually caused their inclusion in the matrix. So you just wanted to know, but our research person has repeatedly posited that she's only in the back end, and therefore she would not know the front, which is perfectly understandable. We just want to get that out in the open. No? So with that, Mr. Chair, I think, although we don't have the names specifically yet, we might have to ask for the actual members who are familiar with the operations. Perhaps we would like to invite them po, no, in our next hearing so that we can really clarify their links to the matrix. Moving forward, Mr. Chair. Moving forward po, no, siguro. One interesting that was mentioned in the matrix po is yung Seanway Technologies. And you mentioned po earlier that you were involved with the back end and the permitting. And this would involve permitting po sa PAGCOR. Would that be correct, Mr. Chair?
Yes, that's right
And
po.
please correct me if I'm wrong, we might be mistaken, but our understanding is when you have a parang master permit, master license for POGO operations, if there are service providers, they piggyback on your license. Is that correct?
Yes po, at mayroon rin po silang sariling license na ini-issue
Yes.
po ng PAGCOR. Like for example po, I have this copy na para po ang license na ito ay sa master license po namin, which is Seanway. And mayroon rin pong license dahil mag-a-apply rin po ang mga service provider po namin sa PAGCOR. So
Absolutely.
they have their own license din po.
Yes. They have their own license, but of course, they have to be attached to a POG
Yes
operator.
po.
So in which case, the master license would be Seanway Technologies. And there were some that, I'm sure you're aware of them, they were mentioned in particular. Do you have any relation to Turquoise Diamond Technology?
Ano po siya? Service provider po siya ng master license po namin.
But I mean, do you have any personal relation? Do you have a
No
stock
po.
holding? Or do you have interlocking directors in some of your corporations?
I'm not sure, but I'll check po para hindi
Sige
po
po.
ako magkamali, Mr. Chair, kung okay
Opo.
lang.
Si Miss Amy Nono Cloquigan is a relative of yours.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And are you aware that she is a stockholder of Turquoise Diamond Technology?
I'll check po, Mr.
Sige
Chair,
po.
sa documents.
Okay, we'll probably request po siguro from the SEC some of these documents just to show po na that there is a relation with Turquoise Diamond Technology. Yung Oro 1 po that was mentioned earlier, this was a service provider. Are you familiar with Oro 1 Inc.?
I'm not familiar po kasi service provider lang po sila namin.
Okay po. And Shidai Keji, are you familiar with this service provider?
Shidai KG is one of our service provider.
Apa. Miss Lin, to the Honorable Chairman, of course, are you familiar with a John Stephen Locara?
I'm sorry po.
Are you familiar with a John Stephen Locara?
Alam ko po, isa siya sa incorporators.
Do you have a personal relationship with Mr. John Stephen Locara?
No, Mr. Chair.
None. Although this is a fellow incorporator in Turquoise and Brickheart. Speaking of, lapses, are you aware with Brickheart's technologies po ba?
I'm sorry?
Brickheart Technologies?
Isa po sa service provider
One of the
po.
service providers.
Yes
And
po.
do you have any relation with any of the incorporators?
I think Robic, I'm not sure po kung sino sa mga pamangkin ko ang nandyan.
So
If
you
I'm
have a
not
relative,
mistaken.
perhaps?
If I'm not mistaken po.
Okay, thank you. This bears noting lang po, no, because amongst those mentioned, yung Turquoise Diamond Technology, Oro 1, and Shitai Keji, were service providers that were located in the Baofu compound, which is more notoriously known to be linked to Mayor Alice Guo. So this is one more thing, right, it was mentioned, the matrix, so we wanted to clarify po any relationship that you might have. Lastly, Mr. Chair, just wanted to ask if you know a certain Jason Uson.
Jason Uson is one of the incorporators sa mga companies po.
In which companies po ba?
Nandun po siya sa Pile, nandun po siya sa Full Win, and nandun rin po siya sa holdings po.
Yung XLR?
Hindi po.
Which holdings po?
Pile
Holdings.
Holdings at saka Pile Estate.
And estate.
Yes po.
In fact, he is the president of Pily Holdings or estate po ba?
I'm not
Not familiar.
sorry po, hindi ko lang matandaan kung siya po ba sa Pile Estate or sa Pile Holdings.
But we confirm that he is a president.
I'm not sure po. I'll check po.
Okay,
Para hindi
sige.
ako magkamali, Mr. Chair. Pasensya po.
Do you have a personal relationship? As mentioned earlier, as a businesswoman, usually you would try to get to know the people that you will be getting in business with. And it seems to be si Mr. Jason Uson is one such person that you have business on a regular basis. So would you say, how long have you known Mr. Jason Uson?
I know him around if I'm not mistaken, 2016.
2016. And since then, you've been business partners?
Yes po.
Is he someone knowledgeable in the operations in these
The same lang
corporations?
po siya sa akin. Nasa back office po kami.
back office po.
Yes po.
Because I'm sure you've seen the matrix and there seems to be a comparison that Mr. Jason Uson allegedly would be your counterpart. If there is Ms. Rose Nono Lin for the 60%, understandably, of your husband, we have Mr. Jason Uson who holds 60% on behalf of the Michael Yang companies. Would you know anything to that extent?
I'm not sure po, Mr. Chair.
But you mentioned that you've met Michael Yang previously and you're aware of who he is.
I met Michael Yang year 2013.
2013 po.
Yes po.
And just for the record po, Mr. Chair, si Mr. Jason Uson is also a incorporator for Yangtze and DCLA, which was a company that was mentioned to have problems related to the drug trade. Thank you very much, Ms. Lin. Just to
Thank you po.
clarify
Thank
lang
you,
po
Mr.
yung mga
Chair.
corporation na that. Mr. Chair, I hope that we will be able to invite Mr. Jason Uson, perhaps also Ms. Amy Nono Cloquigan, Mr. Jan Stephen Locara. And I think we would also like to ask siguro si Ms. Lin to provide us a list of yung, because you mentioned ang alam niya lang po is the back end of these operations. But at least for XRL, Shongwei, Paili, Fullwin, Pharmally Biological, and Golden Sun, perhaps we can ask po si Ms. Lin to provide us a list kung sino yung supposedly executive officer or yung may alam po sa operation, and then perhaps we could invite them should the committee decide. Yun na po. And Mr. Chair, with that, I will be concluding my questioning and be yielding to other interpellators. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Gutierrez.